how does small business move forward in unpredictable times, and how do couples stick together, especially those who are collectively supporting a small business? For those answers and a whole lot more, we're going out to Canmore, Alberta, just west of Calgary, and join Karen Stewart. She's with Fairway Divorce Solutions, and so many people tongue in cheek are making fun of it, but it's no laughing matter, Karen. This whole pandemic has put a real strain on relationships when people are quarantined. And if the relationship wasn't all that great to begin with, just tell us, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I know your offices have been getting flooded with phone calls and media requests, but just give us a high level view of what's happening from your perspective.
That's a great question, and thanks for having me. And I'm just going to take one sip of my coffee and I'm going to put it down so I can use my hands, because I love to talk with my hands.
Perfect. And that's the whole idea. We wanted these to be, I don't know what kind of coffee cup you had there. I got the Lambeau Field.
Oh, listen, I'm all about the coffee mug. And my grandfather owned a China store. So one of my little habits is buying China. So this is actually China from Mexico. So yes, no, it is one of my biggest loves in life, is the coffee cup I drink out of. So I'm just going to have a sip and then I can use my hands to talk.
Yeah. And like I say, this is right from Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Every coffee cup has a story, but Karen, what's the story as you're seeing it unfold from, like I say, your vantage point out there in the Canadian Rockies?
Well, what I will tell you is that, I started this business in 2006, and I have never, in how many years is that? 14, 15 years, had the volume of media interested in conversations around what is it that people do, particularly with parenting, and how they manage co-parenting during this time. So that really is an indication of what's going on in our country and even other countries, which is people, they don't know what to do. They just don't know what to do. And and of course, when we're in a state of completely unknowing, that can lead to fear, uncertainty, stress, and that's the parenting side. And then of course, we're seeing a whole lot of discussion around increased conflict in relationships and marriages.
And it begs to, and what we're doing here, Karen, and I know you've been following some of these posts, is the conversations that need to happen for the business world aren't happening in traditional media, which is, as you know, full of fear mongering, and business needs hope, just like oxygen, to survive. So what's this, especially I'm thinking with small businesses, mom and pop operations, you've got husband and wife or partners very much now quarantined and together, and yet the business has to survive. What can you share in terms of what people need to be thinking about, what they need to be aware of? Because if some of those measures aren't taken, they're probably going to a place they don't want to go.
It's interesting. It's so interesting, because all our lives as entrepreneurs, as parents, as, financial, trying to build our wealth, we've been taught to focus on the long term. That's what we've been taught to do. And actually right now, we need to do the opposite. We need to focus on the short term. And there's a couple things we need to do. One is we must remain positive. At the same time, we've got to be a realist. So that does require that you make the short-term decisions to save for the long term. I'll give you an example. I got a call March 9th, believe it or not, early on. And at that time, there were 7 cases recorded. And I had happened the week before to be in a boardroom with one of those 7 cases. So one of the first 7 cases in Canada, I was in the boardroom with one of those people. So I went into quarantine early March. And I thought, the smart thing to do is preserve cash. So immediately, I didn't sort of wait. Immediately, I took steps to go to, I did financial modeling after modeling after modeling to go to worst case scenario to make sure that I made steps in the short term so that my company would survive. And I think, you take that approach to planning and getting into the mud. Sometimes by nature, we just don't want to look at it. We're pleasure seekers, pain avoiders. And you can take that exact advice and apply that to what's going on in your relationship, in your marriages, and with parenting.
Let's focus in on the relationship, because we've seen it speculated on social media that the number of divorces is going to go through the roof once this pandemic comes to an end. But that doesn't help the business owner and the partner, or maybe they work the business together. And I don't mind sharing with you, Karen, like I feel very fortunate because Dana and I seem to be weathering the storm okay. And for the most part, I mean, there has been, to be honest, there has been mentions of body bags that we might need to place in order. But all that kidding aside, there's real tension building up in relationships, and we're just so curious to know what has been your experience. What insights can you offer to prevent the worst thing you can imagine for a relationship?
So let's sort of I'd like to sort of take a step back. What we have seen historically is that after if you go back and you map out when are couples most vulnerable, or when do couples actually step into I'm getting divorced mode, and it typically follows after a holidays, time where they have been together for longer durations. So we'll see a spike after the holidays around Christmas, and you'll see the spike after sometimes after summer break, sometimes after Easter or spring break, when families are going away. You'll see it kind of dies before and then it spikes after. What's interesting about that is this is like an exaggerated long-term holiday where we can't even go out and do something. We're stuck in the same home, so we can just predict, and we've seen it in the media. I'm a little cautious of media, to be honest with you, because I think it thrives on negativity. So they love to share the bad stories, and I think it's our job to find the silver lining in this. So there are going to be some fallouts. There's no question, and we've seen the media talk about that. So if you're going to, there's two things. Can you avoid a fallout? Well, potentially, and it may just be suck it up. It may just be suck it up. Keep your mouth shut. Our grandmothers used to say, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. I do that. It's kind of cool. You have my wonderful husband behind you there. So I've learned that after being through divorce and determined to have a successful marriage, is sometimes you just have to suck it up and not say what you maybe want to say. The other thing is, what are we going to do after this? Like, let's say you've decided the marriage is going to be over. Those steps right after this virus, and when we get to make our decisions, that's going to be the pivotal point. I'm not pro-divorce. I never have been. But if people are going to be divorced or get divorced, I am absolutely an advocate of doing it in a smart way. And that's the key. There's lots of things you can do to keep the temperature down in your house. And really it's just zip it. And if you're going to communicate, ask, and we can maybe talk about that, some ways to approach difficult conversations when you're stuck at home. I'd love to have a little bit of a share about how to do that, because that's actually not that hard to do.
Go ahead, because I mean, here you are, you and Dan, I know, are out there in Canmore, and I know you both share this love of mountain climbing, and I'm guessing you can still get out to the great outdoors, but still, people are more than curious to know, well, how do you
approach those?
Yeah, how do you do it?
Okay, so here's some little rules, and this doesn't just apply, by the way, to relationships. It applies to our love relationships. It applies to any relationship you have, even if it's in the course of business. I wish, as a side note, I wish we would teach conflict and like conflict skills, how to manage conflict and how to communicate. We don't do that. I have my, I'm a chartered mediator now, and my goodness, of all the designations I have behind me, learning how to actually navigate difficult conversations was probably the best thing I've ever learned. But
wait
really,
a second. You mean we shouldn't wait for our passive aggressive nature to build and build and build, and then it blows up, and then there's, bomb blasting all over the place? You mean that's not the right thing to do?
well, I guess if I wanted to really promote Fairway long term, then I could keep doing that. uh, okay, so let's say something's really bugging you, and you just want to say it. First of all,
and let's just say something is really, I'm asking for a friend right now. Something's
okay.
really bugging. Go.
Okay, so first of all, don't wait till you've calmed down. So what we do by nature is we've been taught to sort of react. So number one is if you verbalize to yourself, your inner voice is, boy, that really bugs me when. Let's take, for example, something like you've got a neat freak and you got a messy person, and they're stuck in quarantine together. And it's never really bothered them because they've been able to have somebody come in a couple times a week and clean their house, or once a month. Now they're stuck together, and it becomes very overtly obvious about the differences. So let's say the neat freak is going to have a conversation with what they perceive the messy person to be. And the messy person will never perceive themselves as messy, just so you know. So the neat freaks, first of all, they're going, oh my gosh, this is really bothering me. So they're in the moment, they're heated in the moment. So first of all, right there, that is not the time to have the conversation. You are in the wrong part of your brain to have that conversation, because you'll get right into aggressive, defensive, argumentative positioning. So you've got to get to a place of calm. So if there is something bothering you, the first thing is to know that you need 1 or 2 days to be able to have the conversation. And you can almost set the intention around, okay, I'm looking for the right moment to have this conversation, and kind of set that out. You'll be really surprised. That moment will come. That opportunity will come. The discipline is not doing it in the moment. So you want to have a conversation, you're saying, okay, there will be an opportunity to have this. So that opportunity, a day or two, it's not going to matter if it's a day or two later, the opportunity presents itself. That's where you ask permission to have a conversation. So, honey, I would like to talk to you about something. When would be a good time? You need to ask people permission to ask them. And they'll say, well, what do you want to talk about? Just say, oh, it's just something, is this a good time? Because if not, we can find another time. The best thing to do is trying to approach the conversation when it is a good time, because people want to know. Then you can frame it like this. Take the word you out of your vocabulary and take the word why out of your vocabulary. You remove you and why from your language, and your relationship will go from here to here, even if you don't really like the person right now. So those are 2 words that we need to remove from our vocabulary. So, last week when we were finishing dinner, and I had spent a couple hours in the kitchen, and I was really hoping that you were going to clean up the kitchen. And I found that my feelings were really hurt. And I know that it would never be your intention to hurt my feelings, but my feelings were really hurt. And I'm wondering if we could have a conversation around that, because I'm guessing you may not understand how it is that I feel when the kitchen is a mess when I get up in the morning. So you've used you a little bit, but never as you did that, you did that, you did that. You're owning your feelings, and you're making the story about you. You're a master of storytelling. This is a story about me, right? These are my feelings, and I own these feelings, and I don't need to apologize to anybody about my feelings. I'm asking to be able to express them. So then you might say, and then encourage them to ask questions. So what will often happen is people will jump in and start saying, oh, well, no, just say, let's, and if they do that, and you can become the skilled person, you say, oh, that's interesting. And then repeat back, and I know this sounds terrible, but so I'm understanding you to say this. Am I understanding correctly that this is what you mean? So a skilled communicator would say, oh, I'd like to better understand that. And they would start asking questions. Oh, so when I left the dishes out for 48 hours and I didn't get to them, did that bother you? That's a skilled communicator. Most people aren't skilled. That's just a fact. So the skilled communicator needs to, rather than reacting, they need to start paraphrasing what the other person has said. And if you paraphrase, we call it paraphrasing and probe. So, oh, I understand. You didn't think it was really important to do the dishes. You thought it was more important to go outside and take the garbage out, because they may have had a different value system. Maybe the garbage being out was a higher on their value system than doing the dishes. So if the person can start probing, paraphrasing, asking permission to have the conversation, making the story about ourselves, guess what? There's no opportunity to fight.
So if I'm hearing it correctly, there's three things that are just coming through loud and clear through our Zoom screens here, not the least of which is zip it, suck it up, and calm down. Number one. Number two, really resist the urge to attack and point fingers and you. And also number three, try and paraphrase, kind of like we're doing now. But also, I thought you said something brilliant about, I know it wasn't your intention to, push my buttons in any way or what have you, blah, blah, blah. Because so much, as you know, Karen, from your work, a lot of it's never intentional, but it's just, I think everything, I'm telling folks that everything now through this and how we communicate, online or off, is being magnified because emotions are naturally running high. Any final thoughts, especially for all the business owners who are watching this, and how do they keep a clear head going forward?
So I think, I have a saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. And I think we can apply that, as hard as it is to plan when nobody knows exactly where we're going and we don't have a crystal ball. Whether it's co-parenting and you are trying to come up with a short-term plan of how you're going to navigate children back and forth, come up with a short-term plan. You shouldn't be moving kids, shuttling kids back and forth during the week right now. Be creative, do what you're doing, reaching out and having conversations. You can watch movies. So I think there's the parenting, there's the home side. I think if you want your marriage to get through this in a really successful way, use this time to develop a skill set. And know, if you truly, truly love your spouse, in very, very few cases where there's, really, really difficult circumstances, most people can save a marriage. And when they say it takes two, I'm going to actually say it actually takes one. It actually takes one. And then the other thing, if you are a business owner, again, plan, do your financial projections, get real, do the math. We've become so dependent on our intuition. And I know we're all about that. Oh, how does it feel? What's our gut level? Do the math. The math will tell you what you need to know in business and in life. And I think the final thing is find the silver lining. It's not all bad news. There is opportunity. There are going to be some amazing success stories after this. Why not be one of them?
And you know what? This photograph here, I think, illustrates it. You're right. Like, just so you know, Karen and Dan are nestled right in the Rockies. And I'm thinking already you and Dan have probably had some moments out there that you probably didn't experience before all this. Tell us about that.
Well, I think before the parks decided we couldn't go hiking in the parks, but there's something about getting outside in nature. And the one thing about nature is there is total social distancing. And I really encourage people, if you can do that, do that. It clears your head. We've had fun social distancing and being outside. I think there's an opportunity to reflect. And I find that that's what both Dan and I are doing, and people around us that we care about are doing. What really matters, and boy, have we ever you're probably finding this, we've been so caught up we've been so busy, 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 busy that this is forcing us to take a step back. I love the way some of the entertainers have showed up and they're being really real and you can see their roots. And I love that. I love that people are getting real. And it's just not all about the makeup and the plastic surgery and how we look. I mean, that matters because we're all a little bit vain, but get real. And what does it really matter? And boy, if we can take some silver lining out of this and some learning and maybe don't watch the media. Like, it's so depressing, don't you find?
Well, that's why, and you know what, Karen, that's why we thank you for doing these calls. That's why we're on a mission to get leaders like you to share all the silver lining learnings. So we really appreciate you doing this.
Well, this was a ton of fun and anytime, and thank you for doing the job you do, because you're great, you're a real inspiration, and I know you've talked to a lot of great people, and I've really enjoyed watching those interviews.
Well, Karen, these are conversations, and I leave every one of them with a fresh perspective. And I think I just heard something about silver lining learnings, even for couples and business leaders and their teams. There's some silver lining learnings. I love what you said as well about nature, because we've been out. I think some of our best walks for Dana and I have happened out in nature. She made the observation the other day that it was so good because nature, it's still the place where everything makes sense. There is no chaos in nature. There's a natural order of things. And I think that's very true right now. The more time we can spend and connect with that and de-stress and defuse all of the emotions that are running, we're all going to be in a much, much better place. So Karen Stewart from Canmore via Calgary, Alberta, joining us via Zoom and helping us all lead together in these unpredictable times.